Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Ed Sudoku, and Michael Dryden. This week, amid the media interest that has come from Mark Clattenburg's new book, Whistleblower, My Autobiography. The name, that's a crap name, but okay. We take a look at some of the book's revelations, the treatment of referees received at the high level and grassroots, and we'll discuss whether more needs to be done to protect the men in black. I didn't actually write that bit. I need to highlight that because that's a shocking piece of writing from Dryden. The Men in Black. Men in Black is a fantastic film, to be fair, but yeah, I'm not too sure about that. But before we start, please follow us on Twitter at @Wyfutbol_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Instead of asking how you are, Dryden, why did you write Men in Black there?
I was just thinking, what could I get just to say in the intro?
Fair play. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Back in the northeast, did the Hackney half marathon yesterday as well, which was good. I did that like 4 years ago, and it was quite not a small event, but like an averagely sized event. It's massive now. It's like a music festival. So I went down there, and I just did it. I just did it because I wanted to train for something. So I just went on my own, did it, left, came back to the northeast, and I felt like such a loser because it was actually such a big event, but didn't really shout anyone to come down. So, but no, that was good, and back in the northeast, going to Sunderland versus Cheltenham Town tomorrow night, which which is not. I think it's the first time. It must be the first time we played them in a number of years. But that's going to be a cold night on Wearside watching us against the Cheltenham lads. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. How are you doing, Ches?
I was doing okay after the North London derby. Spirits were high. However, Brighton just conceded about 15 minutes ago, which is bad for my fantasy.
You're not
So
doing very well, are you?
no, I'm not 6 game weeks in. It's been a tough season so far, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we'll turn it around. The team is good. They've been unfortunate. Some poor decisions on my behalf, but yeah, not much to report on that front. To be honest, I haven't done a half marathon myself, nor do I want to do one.
You have, haven't you? Did you do Brighton half marathon?
Yeah, no, that was ages ago. I haven't done one like recently. That was ages
Okay.
ago, and I didn't really enjoy it. To be fair, it was difficult. The whole running thing's not really for me. But moving on, why this episode specifically?
So, I mean, when I messaged you probably 4 days ago to say that I want to do a topic on refereeing, I could sense in your reply that you were a bit like, you were like, what exactly do you want to do on refereeing? But as you said in the intro, Mark Clattenburg has released a book, or he's releasing a book, sorry, in 2 days on the 30th of September. So, I mean, just to be clear, unfortunately, I don't know Mark Clattenburg personally. So this is not a plug. I'm not his PR manager, career coach, etc. Just FYI, if anyone wonders why I'm doing quite a large part of this on his book, but it's just quite interesting, and it's received quite a lot of media interest because it's got seemingly quite a lot of good insight on refereeing as a whole. You don't typically get, I mean, you don't get many referees come out and talk full stop on specific decisions or about their careers. So this is quite a interesting thing for his book to come out. I mean, I'm tempted. I'm gonna go on to discuss more about what's in the book. I haven't got it. I've not read it, but there's been a lot of insights that have been in the press. I'd be interested to get hold of it just to see what those insights are. But he seems like quite a bizarre guy, so I might not. A lot of it is quite funny and jovial that comes out, but actually there's a lot of serious insight in there as well around the life of a referee, the politics in kind of the refereeing fraternity, the stress that comes with it, the abuse that is unsurprising. That is aimed to cause a lot of people in the footballing industry, not just referees. I don't think we've ever really done a podcast episode that is focused specifically on refereeing as well. So I think that was quite interesting to do. But as I pushed on there, we all see on our screens referees getting berated by players, managers, and fans. On the pitch, fans singing "You don't know what you're doing" amid some more creative chants. And you've got like managers and players who go on post-match rants at press conferences, on TV afterwards about the officiating. People like Jurgen Klopp, who there's a big one that he was ranting about. I think it was Brighton last year and a late penalty that they got to equalise. Neil Warnock, as much as I love the guy, the worst part about him is he absolutely berates officials. It's quite painful to watch. And also there's the other side as well, the really dark side of the internet. Basically, we all see on social media refs getting abused and humiliated by fans. Even sometimes players tweet stuff, but refs seldom get a chance to explain their actions. They're seemingly expected to be seen and not heard. I remember Graham Souness once saying, I think there was a intonation by someone that refs should get more of a chance to say and reveal their logic behind decisions. And I think Souness was like, no, they should, why they should be doing their job and get on with it. But actually, we'd actually get more of an insight into their logic if they could do. So today I want to look at, refereeing generally, pose some of the questions of, is it right that they should be seen, not heard? What more can be done to protect officials if they should be at all? And, should all of us, including myself, treat them with a bit more respect?
Yeah, I think you are right. I was a bit confused as to why I wanted to do an episode on refereeing. I was like, oh, what do you want to talk about? Like the decisions in a game, or like
Yeah.
the history of the refereeing flag? The linesman flag. I thought, yeah, that'll be a bit dull. But no, it is a really interesting topic. I think football is archaic in its approach to tackle abuse. Actually, no, football's archaic to tackle or change anything. I mean, look at the issues
Mm,
you've had with VAR. I'm sure the same has been with other things they've tried to change as well. We're going to talk about it later on about its issues at grassroots level. I actually recall an episode, right, where Dan Gosling was at Bournemouth. This was years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And a ref apparently teased him over their league position. And he
mm,
was irate, being like, oh, it's unacceptable. Like, how can a ref do that? The amount of abuse players give a
mm,
ref per game, all
yeah.
the linesmen, all officials, like, for whatever reason. The fourth official standing next to those managers with fourth official must be one of the worst things in the world. You've got
Yeah.
Sir Alex Ferguson chomping gum for 90 minutes in your ear. You got people like Wenger, Sam Allardyce, Klopp, all of them screaming, literally
Mm,
screaming. Like the fourth official you can't do anything. And it's like, it's funny and easy for players and managers to say, oh, that's unacceptable. But what about the abuse that refs get? It's a culture which is accepted and that needs to change. But it's a question about how you actually do that.
definitely. And I reckon a few of the managers have got pretty bad coffee breath as well, firing that straight in your face. So
Big
that's another side
Sam.
to it.
If anyone's got bad coffee breath, it's Big Sam. Big Sam Allardyce has got. I know he did a pod on him, and I think he's a brilliant manager. Big Sam's got bad coffee breath, and so does Nigel Pearson. They've got bad coffee
Yeah.
breath.
Who would you rather fight, Allardyce or Pearson? Just quickly.
Allardyce, he's older, I think.
Less mobile.
Yeah, less mobile. But Pearson, he's got some fight in him. I reckon he'd be tough. And obviously, the Grandmaster is Dyche. I wouldn't want to go near Dyche.
I'd actually go Pearson as the grandmaster. He's had some health problems as well, Pearson. So yeah,
Yeah.
potentially we'll go with Dyche on that one. Um, so yeah, to kick things on, I mean, so I think the first thing that has been released about, or has been in the press around Clattenburg's book and some of the anecdotes from a more jovial and more kind of a more casual standpoint has been the stuff about the rivalry between officials. He talks about rivalries that are built up over time, like between himself and mainly with Martin Atkinson, but also with Graham Paul and Howard Well. This is all quite funny. Like it's this bit in particular because it just makes you laugh thinking about these guys. We know these guys are on our screens or were on our screens so much. They actually probably have the most camera attention when you're watching a game live. I feel like we know these people personally, like characters in a film, so like or a TV show. So to see them in this context spatting each other just is really quite interesting. Um, it's also a side to refereeing I hadn't really considered, but it makes sense. Only one person can ref the Champions League final, the FA Cup final, etc. So there is really a competitive element to it. You're competing with these fellow refs for the big jobs, and that is tied to your livelihood. Um, so you'd think that all refs would be in solidarity because they all do quite a difficult job. They get a lot of abuse, and to an extent they will be. It's probably like a sibling rivalry. The siblings still love each other, but at the same time, they they might not necessarily overly love each other, like each other as personalities, etc. Um, so Clattenburg's spat with Atkinson actually started with a bust up in a five-a-side match that seemingly the officials were playing. Um, Clattenburg stating that I caught him with a tackle, he threw a punch, and then I threw a punch back. From that moment, I knew there was always a certain level of respect between us, but friendship was out. Proper clash of the Titans down at goals or down at down at Power League, wherever it was. Um, he also went on to talk about Clattenburg, talk about Atkinson's alleged posse. So he stated that you would be on a European trip and one of Atkinson's minions would be with you as fourth official, and you knew he was reporting back to his master. It's just,
That's mad.
it's bizarre. And with Graham Paul, so Paul had been seemingly, or according to Clattenburg, one of Clattenburg's role models, coming into it. Paul's now retired a long time ago. But Paul actually reported Clattenburg to the PG or PGMOL, the kind of the body that works on behalf of I think it works on behalf of the refs, or they work with like VAR and that sort of thing. So Clattenburg arrived at a match with a man bag, which I don't know if he means a wash bag, but it says man bag from the research I looked at, stating that, or Paul stated that he didn't think it was appropriate for a referee. And Clattenburg's quote from it is, "Did you have to dress like an effing square? After that, I could not trust him." It just sounds so bizarre.
Yeah, I just think that Graham Paul also has bad coffee breath as well. Having thought about it, having thought about the people we mentioned earlier, he's definitely one as well. But it's just really interesting, like how these referees argue and kind of have their set friendships. I guess it makes sense. It's the same with any form of work. I mean, you would assume there's solidarity because they're the ones getting abused, but often actually within that there's hierarchy. I mean, these are the elite referees in the country. I
Yeah.
guess to get there's a certain level of competition between them to kind of get to the top. And then when you are in the select group of, let's say, 15 or however many refs there are, it's all about, who's the number one. Because, some of those refs have never been in Champions League finals or FA Cup finals, and some have. So there's a bit of a hierarchical system, which is quite difficult to navigate, it seems, as Clattenburg's alluded to in his book.
Yeah, and I should say, like, just to place some context on this, like, as I said earlier, there's not been a load of material released by refs over the years about their career and co. So we are really going for the context of this episode. We really are taking a lot of what Clattenburg says as gospel to an extent, but we've got to take that or we've got to just remember that this is just one person's side of the story. He's obviously talking about other refs that can't really defend themselves in this forum or in his book. So we have to take that context into it. Moving on to Howard Webb, Clattenburg states, "I did well for him in the Euros as an additional referee. However, when Howard doesn't need you, he doesn't speak." There is an element here that I sense from this that Clattenburg is a bit bitter with a few of these men. So I don't know if it speaks a lot more about Clattenburg than it does them. But there is a level of bitterness here, particularly someone like Howard Webb. I mean, Howard Webb's, I believe, is ref to World Cup final. I think it might have been the one with De Jong got sent off was Howard Webb in 2010. I think that's, so I have to fact check that, but he has refed in a World Cup final, whereas Clattenburg's done a Euros final. He did the Champions League final. He's got them tattooed on his wrist or his leg somewhere. But I just get the sense there's a bit of bitterness here, either from like a cliquey standpoint in terms of not being invited in to the crowd, or just from career aspirations and whatnot. Moving on to Mike Riley on a European trip with Mike Riley. Clattenburg was accused by Riley of stealing his speakers and then found Riley rummaging through his bags moments before kickoff at the San Siro. This is the Champions League game. It was AC Milan versus Benfica at the San Siro, and Riley is rummaging through Clattenburg's bags. They later turned up days later, and Riley apparently didn't apologise to Clattenburg for going through his stuff. So yeah, overall, the refereeing circle does seem to have become very cliquey and political, if it hasn't already been. According to Clattenburg, Graham Paul had an exclusive red wine club, but then Clattenburg had his own group of Phil Dowd, Alan Wiley, Dermot Gallagher, and Dino, as he refers to him, being Mike Dean. And Clattenburg claims that the politics started in that Webb era. So it seems like there's quite a lot of cliques going on, of posse behaviour going on, just not just from like Atkinson and Riley, but also Clattenburg and co.
The thing is with these books is they need to be interesting, right? And the way they're interesting is with big reveals. I think
Yeah.
you're definitely right on the Howard Webb point that he does come across a little bit bitter
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, because he's one of the most decorated refs probably ever in English football from memory. The Red Wine Club sounds like a secret Tory club as well. I don't know why it was called that. Red Wine Club sounds a little bit like, the secret Tory alliance, the referees band together, but that's just my own thinking. But it is interesting how he kind of talks about that as well. Fun fact, Dermot Gallagher went to school with my dad, Believe it or not, I think he was
Ah,
the year above him. Actually, I need to fact check that. If he's listed,
was he the ref in the playground or not?
uh, who knows? Who knows? To be honest, who knows? He was regulating school football. I mean, it was a bit pretty wild time. But I do have
Mm,
time for Clattenburg's energy. He's made quite a few controversial comments since he's retired. I feel like now he's retired, he wants to be in the spotlight in a different way, which I don't
mm,
mind. There are many refs that have kind of left the game, and that's the last you hear of them. And I think there is a shrouded mystery around some of them where you do want to know more. You do want to understand, I think did Clattenburg not he confirm in his book that Fergie time did exist? It's like, well, why? And I feel like there's a few hush hush things in the refereeing circle which he seems willing to reveal. It's interesting to hear that the refs aren't on the same page, though I'm not surprised. It'd be interesting to see how that's formed now with some of them are still refereeing. Atkinson still is, I believe, but just
mm.
some of the other refs as well, especially the ones coming through.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. So you think someone like Clattenburg coming out, this is a means for him to make more money, to maybe get some work elsewhere, in the media, perhaps. Back to that Howard Webb anecdote. He actually, Clattenburg had said that Howard Webb hadn't invited him to some some party that was linked to the one of the competitions um, they were working in, who just seems to link to this kind of just seems to be quite a bitter guy. So perhaps we take some of his anecdotes with a pinch of salt. But moving on to less jovial um, anecdotes and kind of revelations from the book, and less revelations because this is not particularly surprising. But moving on to kind of online abuse that we look at here for the referees. I mean, we're all aware of the abuse people in the public eye receive on social media. It's not just footballers or people in football. We've seen it happen with countless celebrities and people from the television. Clattenburg states that I'm still getting abuse now on social media, and it's really sad to see the abuse that referees take. I got death threats, and the social media companies wouldn't do anything about it. What does it take somebody to get hurt? Or like what we are seeing now, players getting racially abused. It's not correct. It shouldn't be around in today's society, which is, I mean, it's not surprising that he's getting stick. I'm surprised that he's got Twitter, to be honest. He's actually a member since 2017. I checked this out earlier. I'm not surprised. Like, if I was a ref, the last place I would be spending my time is on Twitter. You'd be getting absolutely, even if you haven't got an account,
Yeah.
you wouldn't find me on that. You would not find me on that site at any point. Um, in February this year, Mike Dean and his family received death threats after Dean sent off Thomas Suchek at Craven Cottage, which is terrible to hear, particularly bringing his family into it. But even so, it's just mad that people have the time to do this. Scrolling through Clattenburg's tweets, there's one right here. So he hasn't really used Twitter extensively. As I said, I'm not surprised, even though he's not officiating anymore. Doesn't surprise me that he's sacked off or hasn't used Twitter like many of us would. A lot of it's just retweeting, plugging things like his book and interviews he's had in the past, whatever. I saw some guy he just like plugged an interview that he did, Clattenburg, with, I can't remember who it was with. Someone just replied to the tweet just saying, "You are shit." What's the point?
Yeah, fair. It's not very
It's
nice, is
just
it?
it's just like it's just because it's just like they're seen as like almost subhuman in the context of football. I think people think they can get away with doing such things, and the sad truth is they can get away with it. You can get away with anything. I mean, um, but yeah, I dread to think what other refs get who are currently in the public eye. I tried to find accounts for Martin Atkinson and Co. and players like people like Phil Dowd and all the refs as well, and couldn't find any accounts. I'm not surprised. Um, we've talked about on other podcasts about the lack of work being done on Twitter and other social media companies to prevent online abuse. We also happened to Bukayo Saka after Euros, for example. Um, and interestingly, after the Dean incident where he got death threats, the Referees Association chairman Paul Field came out and said he thinks eventually a referee's life will be lost due to abuse in the future, which is such a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think that is what's going to happen, to be honest. I mean,
Mm,
social media companies do need to do much more. But it's a record which is going on and on because, the heat on these sports professionals and people in the spotlight, i.e., officials as well, is unbearable. But nothing seems to be really changing, and we keep going on about this, like the Euros. Oh, it's
Mm,
terrible. Like we need to do more, but nothing really seems to be happening. And it's just how much more are people willing to take, or companies are willing to see before they take action. I'm surprised he does have an account, Clattenburg, but then at the same time, as you said, it could be for promo predominantly or
yeah.
to do sort of stuff like that. But yeah, the online abuse. I think referees. It's all tied to football. I think football has an online abuse problem. Football has an in-stadium abuse problem. It's
Mhm.
which do you tackle first? Obviously, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I think you have to tackle offline first because that's within the FA's powers. When it's talking about
Mm,
Twitter, Facebook, like, there's only so much you can do. You can't go and say to Clattenburg and all these people, don't be on social media because that's how a lot of them get money. You know,
yeah,
footballers,
yeah,
yeah, you could say, oh, referees and footballers earn loads and loads of money, but it's still a stream of income for them. It shouldn't be, oh, this is a potential moneymaker for me. I can't go on it because I'm going to get told to die, because that's pretty unacceptable. But
yeah.
I agree with what you mentioned before. I just think that something will have to happen very seriously to someone very important, because I'm sure there are people getting abused online that play low league football that may have died or committed suicide or self-harmed. But until it's someone very high profile, these companies won't bat an eyelid.
Yeah, true. I just find it mad how you can create an account. I create an account just with a pseudo name like Sugar Daddy 63 or something, and put a picture of like Pikachu as my profile picture, and I can just create an account and I can just send someone abuse and then have no clue who I am because there's no accountability to it. There's no. We should start verifying more people's accounts, like not just those people who are somebodies apparently, like Philip Schofields and whatever, because they're famous. But why don't we why don't we have every account verified with people might say it's an invasion of privacy and freedom of speech, but actually people are abusing freedom of speech by abusing people. So
Yeah,
I
very
think
true.
um, I think there should be more accountability
Yeah, very true. Also,
personally.
a peek into Dryden's personal life there with the username he decided to pick. No one prompted him to say that. He could have picked any. He could have picked any username under the sun. He could have picked Hellboy 101. He could have picked Red and White Army, but he chose to pick that. So take from that what you will. I won't say anything more on the matter.
Yeah, each to their own. So moving on to a section I've titled "Offline Abuse," effectively meaning, abuse at games, at games, around games, before and after games, either at the top level, by the masses of fans, players, and managers that we see on our screens. Some of it more severe than others, or more pertinently at grassroots levels, grassroots level by players, managers, parents, etc., which is another factor on that side of it. In terms of like the higher level stuff or the more high profile fixtures, you know, in terms of like, so refs getting surrounded by players constantly and getting in their face and being furious and really berating the ref. I feel like it's kind of got better in modern football as time's gone on, but it still does happen, and it sets a poor example. Refs have the power to card players for dissent, but it's not always easy for the ref to just do that all the time because if they boot a player or sent a player off every time they swat him, they'd probably be sending off two or three players. That in theory is correct. That should be what happens, and that should be what actually sets the example and stops and turns this kind of culture around. But in the short term, it's easy to say that, and a ref could, in the short term, think, well, if I continue to do this, if I continue to send players off, it's going to make things worse in that game. I might get a lot of stick afterwards. You've got to think of it in that context. But actually, that would be the thing that would start changing the game if we start just seeing like straight reds all the time for this type of dissent, or any type of dissent. Um, and Clattenburg, interestingly, kind of on that point, it talked about creating a transparent environment for refs. So he said that I'm all for referees being transparent. I'm all for referees being open. He said, why not? It's an open world. Referees need to communicate their decisions. I think if it's done in a controlled environment, it would benefit the game because people can understand why a referee made a decision, right or wrong. It's kind of like I think it's in rugby union, more than matches, but they're mic'd up. You can hear what they're saying. I saw like an Australian soccer game where they trialed that, and it was kind of getting played through the alongside the commentator, so you could hear what was being said at certain intervals when the game was stopped. That seemed to work quite well, but when you apply it to, I don't know, I think it was a pretty minor game. You apply it to one of the biggest games in the world, that might be where it's a bit more challenging. But I think in this context, he's referring more to, after the game, the referee should be able to come out and give his or her side of the story, rather than it just being that they have to shut up and get on with it, and then they get all this abuse from the media and from managers and players and fans, etc., and they can't defend themselves. So, I mean, potentially that could be a good thing. Downside is it could create an environment where there's an expectation that refs need to come out and explain absolutely every decision. We shouldn't have that expectation. They're doing their job. They're going to make mistakes. I actually think the standard officiating is good. When you consider the difficulty that and the speed of which the game's moving, how fit they need to be, the difficulty of not only working with four officials at once, but having to make really tight calls in big matches with a lot of people watching, in an atmosphere in a stadium with quite a raucous atmosphere, etc., is quite difficult. But overall, the theme of this, from my point, this pod from me, is there is a clear lack of respect for officials, I think, and I've been guilty of that myself. Um, so yeah, I think there is a clear lack of respect for officials, and I think it's behind the majority of abuse and mistreatment we see on and off the pitch.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I don't really get the point on, refs booking players could stoke the fire. I mean, we mentioned rugby. I think that's a
Mm.
brilliant example where abusing the ref is not tolerated, and it's this
Yeah.
culture, talking about the abuse and talking about fans are frustrated about decisions, which then drives abuse. But the ultimate point is, and I know rugby's very good at it, is that the ref's word should be final. There are people, right, that are arguing against VAR, saying the refs make mistakes. But then the same people are then like, oh yeah, but like if the
Mm.
ref makes a red card, because obviously VAR is predominantly offsides. I know it does review red cards, but let's say we're
Mm.
talking about fractional offside. Like, oh, that's the way the game was. Let's not change it. But then you're the same guy who's fuming that the ref has missed
Yeah,
this clip,
100%.
and that's the problem, is that the culture needs to change. I mean, explaining decisions, as you rightly said, would probably help that. But I think fundamentally, tougher sanctions need to be put in place in order to prevent that. And there will be teething problems. Like, it's easy to compare it to rugby. Rugby's been played, it's only been played professionally for 25, 30 years,
Mm.
but it's been around for decades, centuries, even about a century odd. So to change that culture takes a very long period of time. And I think that's kind of what, football needs from the top to the bottom. Because if I'm seven, I'm playing grassroots football and I'm seeing my favorite player, you know, abuse the ref, or even at stadiums, you can't turn a blind eye. You go to games when you're a kid and you're seeing fans heckling everyone. Your dad may
Mm.
not, your dad may do it as well, or your uncle or your brother or whoever, and then you just join in. So unless if
Yeah.
the FA can control this, they can control offline abuse. They just choose not to do enough about it. They can control stadiums. There can be tougher sanctions in place. It's the same with racism. It's the same with abuse to referees, but they don't really want to know. And I think ultimately it won't be the refs walking off the pitch. I think that there's not enough people fighting their corner for them to feel that they could do that. But it will eventually be the abuse that players are getting. I think we're not too far away from a period where that will happen in the
Mm.
Premier League. And when that happens, perhaps that spotlight of players walking off abuse could then lead to referees getting more backing as well, not just from the players, but also from the fans as well.
Yeah, I think your point earlier around something big has to happen for change to happen is um is right, and I think it's a shame, but football is really reactive in that sense, and it'll take one referee to quit. It would take probably like quite a young referee, I think, to quit and say, you know what, I can't take this. For change to actually come in, and it's a real shame. I mean, the highest level, it must be. I think they're mental for doing that job. Personally, I just think I've so much admiration for them to do it, because it's they're just getting stick all the time, in the game after the game. They'll probably get stick in the street. It's just I find it. I've hats off to them, but I think they're mental for doing it. Um, moving on to kind of grass level football, then, on the similar topic of like offline abuse, and I found a fair bit of statistics from a BBC article from November 2020, so it's pretty recent. It's quite difficult to find data on this kind of thing, but so taken from a study conducted by the University of Portsmouth, 3 in 5 referees say they experience abuse every 2 games. 93.7% of match officials interviewed said they have experienced verbal abuse at some point in their officiating time, higher than cricket, which had a 56.5%, and rugby union, which is at 53.7%. So obviously, it's quite subjective. I don't know what the sample size was, but a very stark difference there. According to the FA, on average, there are around 2 assaults per week across the English game, including grassroots, which is a bit mad. I see it. I put in my notes, a bit unsurprising. I'm a little bit surprised by that there's that many assaults, but you think how many games have been played at all levels. It's a pretty significant amount of games, pretty significant amount of people involved. So you've got to take it with a bit of context. We don't know, we don't see these. Not all of it will be a parent, running onto the pitch when the referee, when their child gets tackled and swings at the ref. There will be more context to it.
Yeah.
Like the ref might be giving it as much as he can take, but we assume it's possibly more toward the former,
Mm.
based on what we know and experiences. I've played football at grassroots before when I was younger, played throughout my childhood, and parents can be a nightmare. When their kids involved, they just they see it through like rose tinted. They see their sons through rose tinted glasses, or their daughters. I imagine the parent side is probably even worse at girls football because some men will be hyper protective and masculine in those
Yeah.
particular games, and their daughters involved. Um, but as I said, do we need to provide a bit more respect to these guys? You can understand players acting in anger on the pitch at times, being stern, if they've been tackled or on the floor in pain and they shout at the ref because they should have given a foul. You can understand that a bit more because they're actually involved in the heat of the moment. But the parents aren't really, or the spectators or the fans, whoever. The fact that assaults occur is actually a bit mind-boggling, to be honest. But I mean, without refs at all levels of the game, the sport wouldn't exist. At grassroots, you've got refs earning what, £30 a game. That's decent for like if you're a uni student doing a bit of refereeing on the side at uni or somewhere else locally. Yeah, £30. Do that a couple times a week. That's decent little income. But at the same time, you're still turning up for that what is not a significant amount of money. Turning up on a cold, wet mornings in January, on weekends, Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons, Sundays, weeknights, all kind of not very sociable times to be doing that. But yeah, there should be probably be far more respect. I mean, not parents squaring up to the 20 to a 23-year-old ref, at their child's under 10 Sunday league match. I think overall refs do a good job, even at the lower levels. They do a good job based on what they have around them. Most refs at the lower league, when I was, if you're at the lower echelons of Sunday league football, you don't have linesmen. You just literally have a ref. You don't. There's no fourth official. There's no linesman. There's sometimes not even corner flags. Then sometimes there's not even nets and goals, and these guys are having to make like offside calls with grown men who are twice the size of them. Like it's not easy. But obviously, some people, parents, etc., players, they get a bit of high and mighty and think they can do the job 10 times better. But actually, it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. My old maths teacher from school quit grassroots level because he was frequently abused and ended up getting chased off after two specific matches. He was an odd character, to be fair to him, but I'm not surprised. I've seen power league refs actually in Croydon, where I grew up, getting abuse.
Mm.
I actually saw a power league ref square up to another player, which reminds me of that referee that squared up to Alan Judge. Was that not who he squared up to? In the championship last year, there was a ref who called a foul. The player said something to the ref, and then the ref squared up to the player, which was quite mad because championship level refereeing is a very high standard. And I was very surprised. It was like a scene you'd get in some of the mad clips in South America, like where the ref 2 foots like the goalkeeper. So like South America, some mad stuff happens in South America. But yeah, going back to the grassroots level, you're right. It's an incredibly difficult job and not enough done to support them. But as I said, you can't fix grassroots level refereeing and abuse until you fix it from the top. That's
Yeah,
where it comes
definitely.
from. So if you put like, if at grassroots level you get abused, you can cancel the game. That will not work unless if similar legislations are put at the top of the game. I'm not saying if refs get abused, they should cancel the game in the Premier League. But what I am saying is when you're seeing your heroes, whether it's Ronaldo or whether it's Bruno Fernandes or whether it's Lukaku or whether it's
Mm.
whoever, and they're getting booked constantly for the Fs and you're this and you're that, then that will trickle down to lower routes, to lower levels of the game. Just as much as when we see managers do it, we see managers get sanctioned. They are getting sanctioned more often. But it's these things people need to see to realise it's not okay to do it at this level, and we need to protect refs more. okay, you can give me all the abuse you want, but at the end of the game, you're gonna forfeit it. It's up to you.
Mm,
But
yeah.
we need to see these things higher at the higher end of the game, so that the lower ends, because it's just an acceptance and it's a culture. To change culture, you need change, because as I said, playing rugby as well as football, you don't get that in rugby. You really
Mm,
don't. Even at grassroots level, you do not get parents really commenting. They might do sometimes, but then I've had a ref before at school level who was so incensed by a parent's commentary, it was going to affect the team. So like, yeah, if he doesn't do this, then basically I'm going to then every time you get a penalty, I'm going to reverse it, which is actually it's actually mad that
yeah.
it's actually mad that the referee had that much power, but that's the culture. Now you do that in
Mm.
football, he's thinking, right, well, if I actually say that, I'm going to get beaten up or I'm going to get abused. I'm going to get assaulted. And football, where football is a much bigger game, but as I said, you need to put things in place to try and change the culture. Otherwise, it will never change.
No, agreed. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, finally, I mean, what can be done to protect refs? We kind of went over that. So just we've just to wrap up. I think VAR will provide some level of protection. I mean, that only affects the top tiers of Europe's top leagues currently. I don't know how far-reaching VAR has become in terms of lower leagues in other countries, but um, that does provide some level of protection in terms of you know, if there's an issue now that if VAR hasn't overturned something, it becomes more of an issue with VAR. Those in Stockley Park, more decisions would be correct. So, you might still get, oh, Mike Riley was saved by VAR again, but if the outcome is achieved that is correct, then the abuse is less likely. Fans are very reactive. They just really want the best for their team. Really, that's the heart of it. It doesn't excuse them for what they end up doing, but that is the heart of it. So if that does get correct, if the decisions are correct, then in theory there'll be less abuse. Yeah, but and as you said, it needs to come from the top down. I think difficulty at grassroots is policing anything, as you said. Like if the ref does something severe and then finishes the game and his car's on bricks because people have nicked his wheels, then that's not ideal, is it? In the short term, online, as I said, needs to be identities verified. Accountability needs to come into it. It's not these accounts with Sugar Daddy 63 or Goku Rules 992 or something like that. DM footballers with racial abuse and all sorts, and referees giving them stick. So Clattenburg's idea of transparency could help, perhaps, although who knows, that could just or that could just serve to fuel the fire, perhaps.
Realistically, yeah, it has to come from VAR will help, but more needs to be done from the FA. As we've mentioned a few times, do they have the guts to do it? No.
Mm,
Don't really believe in the FA at all with a lot of things, so that's not going to happen. Will social media companies change? No, because they don't seem to care. So I think, yeah, we're on a collision course for something quite drastic to happen. Either player power takes place, which could then lead to an effect, a trickle down effect, which will hopefully get more protection for referees. But even that's skeptical. I think what we would see with that is just, oh yeah, we'll do what to protect players, but the referees can burn. And I think
mm,
social media companies don't care about people like Bukayo Saka, who's known all around the world, extremely famous, um getting social media abuse. Marcus Rashford even more so. If they can't do anything to protect them, they're not going to care one bit about
mm,
about Clattenburg or Atkinson, because you know what, referees I know very well by face. I actually know a lot of them by names. I know Stuart Atwell's one, but
mm,
people don't care enough, and that's the shame of it, really, because these are human beings. But yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath to see change in terms of protection for referees anytime soon.
no, agreed.
Well, I think we'll wrap that one up there. Thank you very much, Dryden, for the information on Clattenburg's book. I'm sure you'll be queuing up to buy it. Well, you don't really need to queue up, would you? Unless if there's a book signing. Unless if there's a book signing, then I'm sure you'll be first in the queue for the book signing. Hopefully there is. Fingers crossed for you. But thanks to everyone for listening, and tune in next time.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.